The first time Marco Vitelli heard the small, trembling voice on his kitchen monitor, he was reviewing surveillance footage from his nightclub downtown. 3 in the morning wasn't unusual for him. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford in his line of work, not when every shadow could hide a rival's blade. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker system Marco had installed throughout his estate. Every room wired, every corner covered. Trust was expensive, and in his world, it bought you a bullet faster than betrayal. My mommy won't wake up. I tried shaking her, but she won't open her eyes. Marco's hand froze over his keyboard. That was a child. A young child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and the voice was coming from his chef's quarters in the East Wing. Okay, sweetheart. I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your name? Lily Harper. My mommy is Sarah Harper, and she cooks for Mr. Vitelli, but she's on the floor, and she's really cold. The blood drained from Marco's face. Sarah, his chef of 2 years, the quiet woman with sad eyes who never asked questions and made the best ossobuco he'd ever tasted. The woman who lived in his guest house with her daughter because she'd mentioned once, just once, that her ex-husband was looking for them. Marco was already moving, his dress shoes echoing against marble floors as he ran through corridors he usually walked with measured, controlled steps. Leaders didn't run. Leaders didn't panic. But that child's voice had cracked something open in his chest that he'd thought died years ago. I'm at the Vitelli estate on Blackwood Ridge, Lily was saying, her small voice trying so hard to be brave. The big house with the gates. Mommy wrote the address on the fridge for emergencies. Smart woman, Marco thought as he burst through the door that led to the private residence wing. Sarah had always been smart. Too smart to end up working for a man like him unless she was desperate. The door to Sarah's quarters was unlocked. He shoved it open, and the scene before him turned his blood to ice. Sarah lay crumpled on the kitchen floor, her face pale as death, lips tinged with blue. Beside her, a little girl with blonde braids clutched a phone in one hand and her mother's limp hand in the other. The child's eyes, huge and terrified, snapped to Marco the moment he entered. For a second, they just stared at each other. Lily had only seen him a handful of times, always from a distance. Sarah kept her daughter away from the main house, away from the business that happened there. Mr. Vitelli, Lily whispered. The phone was still connected. Marco could hear the dispatcher asking questions. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside Sarah, pressing 2 fingers against her throat. There. Faint, but there was a pulse. Tell them she's breathing but unconscious. Pulse is weak. I need that ambulance here now, Marco said, his voice carrying the authority that made grown men tremble. Lily repeated his words into the phone, stumbling over unconscious, but getting the message across. Marco's eyes scanned the scene with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen too many crime scenes. No blood, no signs of forced entry. Sarah's medical alert bracelet caught the light on her wrist, the one he'd never paid attention to before. He grabbed her wrist, reading it. Type 1, diabetes. On the counter, he spotted an empty insulin pen. Did your mom seem sick tonight? He asked Lily, keeping his voice gentle despite the rage building in his chest. Rage at himself for not knowing, for not paying attention. Lily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She said she felt dizzy after dinner. She was sweating a lot. I told her to sit down, but she said she had to prep your breakfast first. Of course she did. Sarah never missed a meal, never complained, never asked for anything. She just showed up every day and did her job with quiet competence, keeping her head down and her daughter safe. Marco spotted Sarah's purse on the counter and dumped its contents out. Receipts, a worn wallet, car keys, and a small glucose meter. He checked the meter's history. The last reading was from 3 hours ago. 42. Dangerously low. Where does she keep her emergency sugar? Juice boxes? Candy? Lily pointed at a cabinet with a shaking hand. Marco yanked it open and found glucose tablets, fruit juice, and packets of sugar. He grabbed the juice, tilted Sarah's head back, and tried to get some liquid past her lips. Most of it dribbled down her chin. "Damn it," he muttered. "Is Mommy going to die?" Lily's voice was so small, so terrified, that something in Marco's chest physically hurt. He looked at this child, this brave little girl who'd done everything right in the worst moment of her young life, and he made a decision that would change everything. "No," he said, and it came out like a vow. "I won't let that happen." The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later, but to Marco it felt like 7 hours. He'd gathered Sarah into his arms, keeping her warm, monitoring her pulse, while Lily sat pressed against his side, gripping his suit jacket with white-knuckled fists. The paramedics rushed in, professional and efficient. Marco rattled off what he knew. Diabetic, hypoglycemic episode, blood sugar 42 3 hours ago, unresponsive for approximately 20 minutes before the 911 call. They got an IV line in, pushed glucose, and within minutes, Sarah's eyelids began to flutter. "Lily!" Her first word was her daughter's name, hoarse and confused. "I'm here, Mommy!" Lily lunged forward, but Marco caught her gently, letting the paramedics work. "Ma'am, you had a severe hypoglycemic event. We need to transport you to County General for observation," one paramedic said. Sarah's eyes finally focused, and when they landed on Marco, kneeling on her kitchen floor in his $3,000 suit, still holding her daughter, something like horror crossed her face. "Mr. Vitelli, I'm so sorry." "Stop!" His voice came out harder than he intended. He softened it. "We're not doing this right now. You're going to the hospital. I'll follow with Lily." "I can't afford... Sarah." He caught her gaze and held it. "Stop talking. Just let them help you." She closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. A proud woman, he realized. A woman who hated accepting help, hated showing weakness. He understood that better than most. The paramedics loaded Sarah onto a stretcher. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, Lily started to follow, but Marco scooped her up in one smooth motion. "We'll take my car," he told the paramedics. "We'll be right behind you." Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and the kind of innocence that didn't exist in his world. He held her carefully, like she was made of glass, and walked toward the garage where his cars waited. His head of security, Vincent, appeared from the shadows. The man never slept. "Boss?" "I need the SUV. I'm going to County General. No one, and I mean no one, disturbs me unless the building is on fire." Vincent's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Understood." Marco buckled Lily into the back seat, and she looked up at him with those huge, trusting eyes. "Thank you for helping my mommy," she whispered. Something twisted in his chest again. "You helped her, Lily. You were so brave. You did everything exactly right. Mommy taught me. She made me practice calling 911 and saying our address. She said it was important because sometimes grown-ups need kids to be the helpers." Marco's jaw tightened. What kind of life had this woman been living that she needed to train her 6-year-old for emergencies? What had she been running from? The drive to the hospital took 15 minutes. Marco spent it stealing glances at Lily in the rearview mirror, watching her clutch a worn stuffed rabbit she'd grabbed before they left. She was trying so hard not to cry, biting her lip, taking deep breaths. At the hospital, Marco carried her through the emergency room entrance. Heads turned. People stared. Marco Vitelli didn't come to public hospitals in the middle of the night, carrying small children. The rumors would be flying by morning. He didn't care. They'd already taken Sarah back to a treatment room. Marco used his name and a carefully calibrated amount of intimidation to get them both through the doors. The nurse who tried to stop him took one look at his face and decided it wasn't worth the argument. Sarah was awake when they found her, propped up in a bed with an IV running into her arm. The color was returning to her face, but she still looked fragile, breakable. "Mommy!" Lily squirmed out of Marco's arms and launched herself at the bed. Sarah caught her daughter with shaking hands, pressing kisses into her hair. "Baby, I'm okay. I'm so sorry I scared you." "The doctor said you forgot to eat enough carbs with dinner," Lily said, her voice muffled against Sarah's hospital gown. Sarah's eyes found Marco's over her daughter's head. Mr. Vitelli, Your meter showed 42 3 hours before you collapsed, Marco interrupted, pulling a chair close to the bed and sitting down. He wasn't going anywhere. You knew you were crashing. Why didn't you treat it immediately? Sarah's face flushed. I had to finish prep for your breakfast meeting. You had those investors coming at 7 and you thought my eggs were more important than your life? She flinched at the edge in his voice. Lily pulled back from her mother, looking between them with worried eyes. Marco forced himself to breathe, to moderate his tone. I pay you well. Extremely well. Why are you living like you're one emergency away from disaster? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Because I am. The words hung in the air between them. Marco studied her face, really looked at her for the first time since she'd started working for him. The fine lines of stress around her eyes, the way she held herself, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. The worn edges of her medical alert bracelet, like she'd been wearing it for years. Talk to me, he said quietly. Mr. Vitelli, you don't want to get involved in... I'm already involved. Your daughter called 911 for my property. You collapsed in my employee housing. And, most importantly, he paused, making sure she was listening. I don't like mysteries in my house. So, you're going to tell me what you're running from, or I'm going to find out myself. And I promise you, Sarah, my methods of finding things out are much less pleasant than a conversation. It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't not one either. Sarah seemed to understand. Her arms tightened around Lily. Can she... Sarah glanced at her daughter. Marco considered, then stood. Lily, there's a vending machine down the hall. Do you like hot chocolate? Lily nodded hesitantly. Marco pulled out his wallet and handed her a $20 bill. Get yourself a hot chocolate and whatever snacks you want, but stay where I can see you through that window. He pointed to the glass wall that looked out into the hallway. Don't talk to anyone and come straight back. Understand? Lily looked at her mother, who nodded. The little girl took the money with careful hands and slipped off the bed, casting one more worried look at Sarah before she left. Once she was safely visible at the vending machine, Marco turned back to Sarah. Talk. Sarah took a shaky breath. My ex-husband, David, he was always controlling, but it got worse after Lily was born. He wanted to know where I was every second, who I talked to, what I spent money on. He'd go through my phone, my emails. If I didn't answer his calls immediately, he'd... She touched her ribs, an unconscious gesture that told Marco everything he needed to know. When I finally tried to leave, he told me I'd never escape, that he'd find me wherever I went, that I'd never work again, never have custody of Lily, never have a life without him in it. He's a lawyer, a good one, connected. He has friends in police departments, in courthouses, in family services. Marco's hands curled into fists. He recognized the type. Men who used the system as a weapon, who hid their violence behind respectable facades. I ran anyway, Sarah continued. Took Lily in the middle of the night and just drove. I've been moving every 6 months, taking jobs that pay under the table, keeping our names off leases and school records. But it's expensive, living like this. The insulin alone costs $300 a month without insurance, and I can't risk getting insurance because that leaves a paper trail. So you're rationing it, Marco said flatly. Sarah's silence was answer enough. That's why you collapsed. You're not taking enough insulin to keep yourself stable because you're trying to make it last. I miscalculated tonight. I thought I could stretch the dose, but I pushed too hard and... She gestured helplessly at the hospital room. I almost left my daughter alone in the world because I was trying to save money on medication that keeps me alive. Mother of the year, right? The self-loathing in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Marco shook his head. You're surviving. There's no shame in that. I put Lily at risk. That's unforgivable. What's unforgivable? Marco said, his voice dropping to something dark and dangerous. is that you've been living under my roof for 2 years and I didn't notice. That you've been working yourself sick trying to stay invisible while some piece of garbage hunts you. That ends tonight." Sarah stared at him. "What?" "You're not running anymore. You're not rationing medication. You're not living in fear." He leaned forward, holding her gaze. "You work for me now, Sarah. Really work for me, which means you're under my protection. And I promise you, your ex-husband, David, was it? He won't get within 100 miles of you or Lily ever again." "You don't understand. David isn't some random guy. He has connections, resources. So do I." Marco's smile was cold. "The difference is my connections don't play by rules. Now, give me his full name and last known location." "Mr. Vitelli, Marco, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm telling." He stood, smoothing his jacket. "Consider it a condition of your continued employment. You want to keep working for me? Then you accept my protection. All of it. Medical insurance through my company. Real insurance. A salary increase that reflects the actual value of your work. Proper security. And most importantly, you let me handle David." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this? You barely know me." Marco thought about that little girl in the hallway, buying hot chocolate with his $20 bill. He thought about the terror in her voice on that 911 call. He thought about all the things he'd done in his life, all the darkness he'd accumulated, and this one chance to maybe balance the scales just a fraction. "Because Lily called 911 from my house, and that makes her brave. Because you've been the best chef I've ever had, and you've never once asked me for anything, which makes you smart. And because—" He paused, surprising himself with what came next. "Because I'm tired of good people getting hurt by men who think power means they can do whatever they want." The irony wasn't lost on him. He was one of those powerful men, in many ways. But there were lines even he didn't cross, codes he still followed. Hurting women and children? That was beyond the line. That was unforgivable. Sarah wiped her eyes. "David Harper. He practices law in Boston. Criminal defense. He has a brother who's a detective there, and his father is a retired judge." Marco pulled out his phone and sent a text to Vincent. "Need a full workup on David Harper, attorney, Boston. Everything. Yesterday." The response came back in seconds. "On it." "It's done," Marco said, pocketing his phone. "Just like that? Just like that." Sarah laughed, a sound caught between relief and disbelief. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll stop trying to be invisible. Say you'll take care of yourself so Lily doesn't have to call 911 again. Say—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "Say you'll have dinner with me. A real dinner. Not as employer and employee. As two people." Sarah's eyes widened. "Are you asking me on a date?" Was he? Marco hadn't been on an actual date in years. There were women, of course. Beautiful women who understood what he was and what he could offer and didn't expect more. But this felt different. This felt like stepping into unknown territory. "I'm asking if you'd like to get to know the man who's about to rearrange your ex-husband's life," he said carefully. "Seems only fair." A smile tugged at Sarah's lips, the first real smile he'd ever seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less haunted. "That does seem fair," she agreed softly. Lily chose that moment to return, arms full of snacks and 2 hot chocolates balanced precariously. Marco moved to help her, and together they arranged the bounty on Sarah's bed table. "I got you one too," Lily said, offering Marco a hot chocolate. "Because you helped." Marco took it, something warm spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the drink. "Thank you, Lily." They stayed at the hospital until the doctors released Sarah in the early morning hours. Marco drove them back to the estate, where he'd already texted ahead to have the guest house completely stocked with proper medical supplies, including 3 months' worth of insulin delivered from his personal physician. "This is too much," Sarah protested when she saw the supplies. "It's not enough," Marco countered, "but it's a start." Over the next few days, things shifted. Marco found himself taking breakfast in the guest house instead of the main dining room, watching Lily eat pancakes while Sarah moved around the kitchen with new energy, no longer looking over her shoulder constantly. Vincent delivered the report on David Harper. It was worse than Marco expected. 3 previous girlfriends with restraining orders. 2 domestic violence complaints that mysteriously disappeared. A pattern of harassment and control that the system had enabled because of his connections. Marco made some calls. Quiet calls to people who owed him favors, who operated in the gray spaces between legal and not. David Harper would wake up one morning to find his life completely dismantled. Bank accounts frozen pending investigation into financial improprieties. His brother under internal review for evidence tampering in unrelated cases. His father's old cases being reopened for judicial misconduct. Nothing that could be traced back to Marco. Everything that would tie David up for years in legal battles he couldn't win. And just to make the message clear, Marco sent one of his men to deliver a message in person. A simple message. Touch Sarah or Lily Harper. Even look in their direction. And what's happening to your career will happen to your body. We clear? David was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He understood the threat. 2 weeks after that night in the hospital, Marco kept his promise and took Sarah to dinner. A real dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant in the city where no one would bother them. She wore a blue dress that brought out her eyes, and when she smiled at him over wine, Marco realized he was in serious trouble. "Tell me something real about you," she said. "Something that's not in my employment contract or the rumors I hear from the staff." Marco considered. He'd spent so long being the boss, the man people feared, that he'd almost forgotten how to be just Marco. "I wanted to be a chef," he said finally. "When I was young, before I took over my father's business, I thought about going to culinary school, opening a small restaurant somewhere quiet." "What stopped you?" "Responsibility, legacy, family," he shrugged. "The same things that stop most people from following their dreams." "Is that why you hired me? Because I'm living the dream you gave up?" "Maybe. Or maybe I hired you because your osso buco is the closest thing to my grandmother's I've ever tasted, and that's worth more than gold." She laughed, and the sound was becoming addictive. They talked for hours. About her childhood in Oregon, his in New York, about her dreams of opening a small catering business someday, his secret desire to just disappear and live somewhere no one knew his name, about Lily, about family, about the strange circumstances that had brought them to this moment. When Marco walked her to his car afterward, he caught her hand. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. My life is complicated. There are parts of what I do that I'll never be able to share with you, things I protect you from by keeping you separate. But I meant what I said. You and Lily are under my protection now. That doesn't end, regardless of what happens between us." She squeezed his hand. "I understand. And Marco, I'm not afraid of complicated. I've been living in fear for years. Being with someone powerful enough to actually protect us, that's not scary. That's relief." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious. She kissed him back like he was her salvation. Things moved quickly after that. Sarah and Lily moved from the guest house into the main residence, into rooms that Marco had decorated specifically for them. Lily got the room with the window seat that looked out over the gardens. Sarah got the suite next to his. They became a strange little family. Marco found himself attending Lily's school plays, teaching her to play chess in the evenings, reading her bedtime stories about princesses and dragons. Sarah cooked in his kitchen, but now she did it because she wanted to, not because she had to. She experimented with new recipes, laughed when things failed, danced to music while she worked. Marco's men were confused at first, then protective. Lily charmed every single one of them, even Vincent, who taught her how to play poker, and then had to explain to Sarah why her 6-year-old daughter knew what a straight flush was. 6 months after that night when Lily called 911, Marco took them both to dinner at his restaurant downtown. The one he owned but never ate at because it was too public, too exposed, but tonight was special. He'd reserved the entire restaurant, filled it with flowers, and had his best chef prepare a meal that was part Sarah's recipes and part traditional Italian. Lily was in on the plan. She'd been Marco's co-conspirator for weeks, helping him pick out the ring, practice what he was going to say. After dessert, Marco stood. His hands were shaking slightly, which was ridiculous. He'd faced down armed men without flinching. But asking this woman to marry him terrified him. "Sarah, 6 months ago, I heard your daughter's voice on my security system, and it changed my life. You've both changed my life. You've made this house feel like a home. You've made me remember that there's more to life than business, and obligations, and the weight of legacy." He got down on one knee, and Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. "I'm not an easy man to love. My life comes with complications and dangers that I wish I could shield you from completely. But I promise you this. I will spend every day trying to be the man you and Lily deserve. I will protect you both with everything I have. And I will love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me." He pulled out the ring, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, because Sarah had mentioned once that emeralds were her favorite. "Sarah Harper, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "Yes. God, yes." The ring slid on perfectly. Marco stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her, while Lily cheered, and the entire restaurant staff, who'd been watching from the kitchen, erupted in applause. "Are you going to be my dad now?" Lily asked when they finally broke apart. Marco crouched down to her level. "If that's okay with you." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "It's super okay. Can I call you Dad?" "I'd be honored." That night, driving home with his new family, Marco thought about the path that had led him here. All the darkness, all the choices he'd made, all the lines he'd crossed. He couldn't change his past, couldn't erase the things he'd done. But he could protect these two people who'd stumbled into his life through a little girl's bravery and a mother's desperation. He could give them safety, security, love. He could be more than what his father's legacy demanded. 3 months later, they married in a small ceremony in the garden, with Lily as the flower girl and Vincent as best man. Sarah wore white and smiled like she couldn't quite believe her life had turned out this way. Marco made vows he meant with every fiber of his being, and when he kissed his bride, he heard Lily whisper to Vincent, "I told you he loved her. I knew it that night when he carried me to the hospital." Vincent chuckled. "You did call it, kid." "I'm good at reading people," Lily said sagely. "Mommy says it's my superpower." Marco pulled back from Sarah just enough to catch her eye. They shared a smile that held everything: gratitude, hope, love, and the strange magic of second chances. "What are you thinking?" Sarah whispered. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," Marco said honestly. "That a 6-year-old girl's courage gave me something I didn't know I was missing." "What's that?" "A reason to be better. A family worth protecting. A future that's not just about surviving, but actually living." Sarah kissed him again, soft and sweet, and Lily cheered, and somewhere in the distance birds sang like they were celebrating too. The past would always be there, lurking in shadows. David Harper had taken the warning seriously and disappeared from their lives, but the memories of those fearful years would never fully fade for Sarah. Marco's business would always carry risk, always demand decisions that kept him awake at night. But here, in this moment, with his wife in his arms and his daughter dancing in the garden, Marco Vitelli understood what it meant to truly win. Not through power or intimidation or control, but through something far simpler and infinitely more valuable: love, family, home. The 3 things he'd thought his life could never hold, delivered to him by a child's desperate 911 call and a mother's fierce determination to survive. Sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the boss needed saving just as much as the people he protected. And sometimes the most dangerous man in the city could become someone's hero, someone's husband, someone's dad. Marco had built an empire on fear and respect. But this fragile, precious thing he held in his arms was worth more than all of it combined. "I love you," he murmured against Sarah's hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. "My protector, my partner, my home." Lily crashed into both of them, wrapping her arms around their legs. "Group hug," she declared. They held each other there in the garden, surrounded by flowers and friends, and the promise of tomorrow. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Marco thought that maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to have this. Allowed to be happy, allowed to be loved, allowed to be more than the darkness that had defined him for so long. And as the stars began to appear overhead, Marco Vitelli, feared boss, ruthless businessman, protector of his own, closed his eyes and thanked whatever force in the universe had brought this woman and her daughter into his life. They'd saved him just as surely as he'd saved them. And that, he thought, was the best kind of salvation there was. 3 months into their marriage, Sarah woke to the sound of breaking glass. She sat up in bed, heart hammering, reaching automatically for Marco's side. Empty. Cold. He'd gone to handle business in the city, wouldn't be back until morning. Vincent and 2 other guards were on the property, but the main house suddenly felt too big, too vulnerable. Another crash, closer this time. Coming from downstairs. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Lily's room was down the hall, and someone was in the house. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, but before she could dial, her bedroom door slammed open. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, and even after all these years she recognized his silhouette. David. "Hello, Sarah. Did you really think you could just disappear? Marry some gangster and live happily ever after?" Terror flooded through her, but underneath it something else sparked. Rage. She'd spent years running from this man, years letting him control her life through fear. And now he was here, in her home, where her daughter slept. "Get out," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You have no idea what you've just walked into." David laughed, that cold sound she remembered from 1,000 arguments. "Oh, I know exactly what I walked into. Your husband thinks he's untouchable, but he's not here right now, is he? Just you and that brat and a couple of hired guns who are currently unconscious in your driveway." No. Vincent was down. That meant they were alone. David stepped into the room, and the hall light caught his face. He looked older, haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, and a wildness that spoke of desperation. "You ruined my life, Sarah. Everything I built, gone. My practice, my reputation, my family's name, all destroyed because you ran to your mobster boyfriend." "You ruined your own life," Sarah said, edging toward the nightstand where Marco kept a gun. He'd taught her to shoot, insisted on it. "All I did was survive." "Mommy?" Lily's small voice from the doorway made Sarah's heart stop. Her daughter stood there in pajamas covered in stars, clutching her stuffed rabbit, looking between them with wide, frightened eyes. David's gaze snapped to Lily, and something ugly twisted his features. "There she is, the reason you left. You always loved her more than me. David, please." Sarah's hand found the nightstand drawer, eased it open. "She's just a child. Whatever you think I did to you, she's innocent." "Nobody's innocent." David pulled something from his jacket, a gun. Sarah's blood ran cold. "I've lost everything, Sarah. My career, my family's respect, my future. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me, and that little mistake you chose over me." Time seemed to slow. Sarah's fingers closed around Marco's gun just as David raised his own. Lily screamed, and Sarah did something she'd never thought herself capable of. She pulled her weapon free and fired. The shot went wide, but it was enough. David dove to the side, his own shot going into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Sarah grabbed Lily, yanked her daughter behind her, and fired again. This time, she didn't miss. The bullet caught David in the shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed into the doorframe, his gun clattering across the floor. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him, her hands shaking violently. Lily pressed against her legs, sobbing. "Stay down! Don't move! Don't you dare move!" David clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. But he was laughing. A horrible, broken sound. "You shot me. You actually shot me. I'll do it again if you come near my daughter." Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Vincent appeared, blood trickling from a cut on his head, but very much conscious and armed. He took in the scene in an instant. Sarah with the gun, David bleeding on the floor, Lily crying behind her mother. "Mrs. Vitelli, are you hurt?" "We're okay. He said you were unconscious. Takes more than a sucker punch to keep me down." Vincent zip-tied David's hands with brutal efficiency while speaking into his radio. "Breach contained. Intruder secured. Get the boss on the phone now." David was still laughing, even as Vincent hauled him to his feet. "You think this is over? You think your husband can protect you from the law? I'm a lawyer. You shot me in your own home. Self-defense won't hold when they find out who your husband really is." Vincent slammed David against the wall hard enough to rattle his teeth. "You broke into a private residence, threatened a woman and child with a deadly weapon, and assaulted security personnel. There are cameras everywhere. We have everything on tape." "You're done." Sarah's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, still holding the gun, still trying to process what had just happened. She'd shot someone, actually pulled the trigger, and watched the bullet hit flesh. The reality of it was crashing over her in waves. Lily crawled into her lap, both of them shaking. "Mommy, you were so brave." "Baby, I'm so sorry you had to see that. I'm so sorry. You protected us. Like Dad protects us." Dad. Lily called Marco Dad now, and the trust in that word made Sarah's eyes burn. She'd brought danger here. Her past had invaded their home, threatened their daughter, hurt Vincent. What if she'd missed? What if David had fired first? What if Lily had been hurt? The front door burst open downstairs. Heavy footsteps, multiple people, and then Marco's voice, cutting through everything. "Where are they?" "Second floor, boss. They're safe." Marco appeared in the doorway seconds later, and the look on his face was something Sarah had never seen before. Raw terror mixed with rage, his usual control completely shattered. His eyes found hers, scanned her and Lily for injuries, then locked onto David slumped against the wall. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Is that him?" Marco's voice was deadly quiet. Vincent nodded. "David Harper. Broke in through the east window, took out Johnson and me with a bat before we knew what hit us. Mrs. Vitelli got him with your backup piece." Marco's gaze swung to Sarah, to the gun still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Something flickered across his face, pride mixed with pain. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside her and Lily. "Let me take that, sweetheart." He gently pried the gun from her hands. "You're safe now. I've got you." Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but hold Lily and shake. Marco wrapped his arms around both of them, and she felt his heart hammering against her cheek. He was scared. This man who faced down rivals and threats without flinching was absolutely terrified. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I brought this to your door. I almost got Lily killed. Stop!" Marco pulled back enough to look at her, cupping her face in his hands. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. You hear me? You protected our daughter. You were incredible. But I swear to you, Sarah, he will never threaten you again." He stood, and the man who'd been holding his family transformed back into the boss. The look he turned on David made Vincent step back involuntarily. "Get him out of my house," Marco said. "Take him to the warehouse. I'll deal with him myself." "Marco, no." Sarah found her voice. "The police. We should call the police. There are cameras. Self-defense. We can do this the right way." Marco looked at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The part of him that wanted to handle this the way he handled all threats. Permanently, violently, fighting against the part of him that wanted to give her what she was asking for. "Please," she said softly. "Let the system handle it. Let him face consequences the legal way. I don't want you to become something darker because of him. He's not worth it." The silence stretched. David watched them with hate-filled eyes, probably calculating his chances if this went to court. Vincent waited for orders. Lily pressed against her mother. Finally, Marco nodded. "Call the police. Tell them we have a home invasion, assault on security, and attempted murder. Make sure they bring the camera's footage." He looked at David. "You wanted the law? You'll get the law. And I promise you, every single charge will stick. Every single day of your sentence, you'll remember that you threatened my family." The police arrived 20 minutes later. Sarah gave her statement sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, Lily asleep against her shoulder. The officers were professional, thorough, and if they recognized Marco Vitelli, or wondered about the estate's heavy security, they kept it to themselves. The camera footage was damning. David breaking in, assaulting Vincent and Johnson, threatening Sarah and Lily with a weapon. "Open and shut case," the detective said. "Attempted murder, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon." David was looking at serious prison time. As they led David away in handcuffs, he looked back at Sarah one last time. The hatred in his eyes was pure, but underneath it, she saw something else. Fear. He was finally afraid. And not of her. Of the man standing beside her, whose arm was wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Marco had done nothing overtly threatening, but every cop in that room understood that David Harper had made a fatal error in judgment. He'd threatened Marco Vitelli's family. Prison might actually be the safest place for him. After everyone left, Marco carried Lily to her room and tucked her in while Sarah stood in the doorway watching. He sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her hair back from her face. "Dad?" Lily's sleepy voice. "Is the bad man really gone?" "He's really gone, Princess. He can't hurt you or your mom ever again." "Because you won't let him. Because I won't let him. Because your mom is strong and brave and protected you. Because we're a family, and families keep each other safe." He kissed her forehead. "Sleep now. I'll be right down the hall." Back in their bedroom, Sarah finally let herself break. She sat on the bed, and the shaking started again, this time from adrenaline crash and delayed shock. Marco sat beside her and pulled her into his arms. "I was so scared," she whispered against his chest. "I saw him and all those years of running, of being terrified, they all came back. And then he pointed that gun at Lily, and I didn't even think. I just acted. You were magnificent." Marco's voice was rough with emotion. "And I almost lost you both because I wasn't here. You can't be everywhere all the time. I should have been here. I should have had better security. I should have..." Sarah pulled back to look at him. "Marco, stop. You taught me to shoot. You gave us a safe home. You protected us in every way you could. What happened tonight wasn't because you failed. It was because David was desperate and stupid and violent. But it's over now." "Is it?" Marco's jaw was tight. "He's not the only threat out there, Sarah. My enemies, people who might want to hurt me through you and Lily. Then we deal with it. Together. As a family." She took his face in her hands. "I didn't marry you thinking life would be safe and simple. I married you because I love you. Because you gave us a home when we had nothing. Because Lily lights up every time you walk in the room. Because you're worth whatever risks come with your life." Marco closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were suspiciously bright. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. You deserve happiness just like anyone else. You deserve family and love and a daughter who thinks you hung the moon." Sarah smiled shakily. "Even if that daughter has now seen both her parents shoot someone." That surprised a laugh out of him, rough and unexpected. "We're quite the pair, aren't we? The best pair." She kissed him softly. "I'm not running anymore, Marco. Not from my past, not from your present, not from anything. This is my life now. Our life. And I choose it. I choose you. Every single day. I choose you. Marco held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. They stayed like that for a long time, two people who'd found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful, despite everything trying to tear it apart. The next morning, Lily insisted on making breakfast for everyone. She stood on a stool in the kitchen, carefully flipping pancakes, while Vincent and Johnson sat at the counter with ice packs, Johnson for his head, Vincent for his pride. "I put chocolate chips in them," Lily announced, "because Mom says chocolate makes everything better." Marco watched his daughter serve pancakes to his men, watched Sarah move around their kitchen with confidence, and he felt something settle deep in his chest. This was right. This was worth protecting with everything he had. David Harper was formally charged later that day. The evidence was overwhelming, the charges severe. His lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, that David had been driven to desperation by Marco's interference in his life. The judge wasn't buying it. "Mr. Harper, you broke into a private residence armed with a deadly weapon and threatened a woman and child. Whatever grievances you felt you had, this was not the answer. Bail is denied." The trial, when it came, was swift. David's previous restraining orders came to light. His pattern of harassment and control was documented. The camera footage of him threatening Lily was shown to the jury, and Sarah watched several of them wipe their eyes. The verdict came back unanimous. Guilty on all counts. 15 years minimum. Sarah was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. Marco sat beside her, his hand firmly holding hers. When David was led away, he looked at her one last time, and she looked back without flinching. She wasn't afraid anymore. That chapter of her life was finally, truly closed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Marco handled them with the smooth professionalism of someone used to public attention, deflecting questions about his business and focusing everything on his family's right to safety and privacy. "My wife showed incredible courage protecting our daughter," he said to the cameras. "This verdict sends a message that domestic violence and stalking have consequences. No one should have to live in fear the way my family did." In the car driving home, Sarah watched the city roll past and felt lighter than she had in years. The threat was gone. David was in prison where he couldn't hurt anyone, and she had a family, a real, solid, unshakable family. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked. "That I called 911 from your house because my blood sugar crashed, and it gave me everything I never knew I needed." Marco smiled, that rare, genuine smile he saved just for her and Lily. "Best emergency call I ever responded to." When they got home, Lily met them at the door, Vincent hovering behind her with a grin. "We made dinner," Lily announced. "Well, Vincent made dinner and I helped, but I stirred the sauce and everything." They ate together in the dining room, Sarah, Marco, Lily, Vincent, and the other men who'd become extended family. They laughed and told stories and celebrated not just the verdict, but this strange, wonderful life they'd all built together. Later, after Lily was in bed and the house was quiet, Marco and Sarah stood on the balcony overlooking the garden where they'd married. "I never thought I could have this," Marco said quietly. "A wife who looks at me like I'm more than what I do. A daughter who trusts me to keep her safe. A reason to wake up that's not just about survival." Sarah leaned into him. "We're all getting second chances, I think. You, me, Lily. We're all becoming better versions of ourselves." "You were always the best version," Marco said. "You just needed to be somewhere safe enough to show it." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd gone from employer to protector, to partner, to husband. The man who'd rearranged someone's entire life to keep her safe. The man who read bedtime stories to a little girl who wasn't his by blood, but was absolutely his by choice. "I love you," she said, "my unlikely hero." "I love you," he replied, "my brave, beautiful wife." They stood there under the stars, two people who'd found each other through crisis and built something unbreakable. The past would always be part of their story. The fear, the running, the danger. but it didn't define them anymore. What defined them now was this: love, family, and the fierce determination to protect what they'd built together, no matter what came next. And in a bedroom down the hall, a little girl slept peacefully, knowing that both her parents would move heaven and earth to keep her safe, and that sometimes the scariest moments led to the most beautiful new beginnings.